Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tiara Talks. I'm Chris Mack, and today I'm going to be reading you an excerpt from my very first book, Can't Turn Away. This book follows Della Whiteley and John Marshall as they fall in love and start a family, which then becomes the exciting adventures of the Marshalls of Fortune County. Now, this book is near and dear to my heart because it was written for a very specific purpose, and I'll explain a little bit more about that after I read this excerpt, which is the first time John and Della ever meet. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Della was a bit nervous. This was her first time her dad had trusted her with the task of picking up a feed order. He had given her the list of everything she was to get and had told her to talk to John to assist her with the new feed order the next month. Sure, Dad, she muttered to herself. No problem. I'll just go into the feed store and ask for a perfect stranger so I can talk to him about stuff I really don't know about. She laughed as something else occurred to her. Oh, Lord, please don't let him be good looking. I'll never be able to talk to him otherwise. While for the most part being shy suited her lifestyle very well, it did still have its drawbacks. She could fade into the background and treated how observe how other people treated others in public, which left her a keen advantage in not being taken advantage of department. But she was still called upon occasionally to actually socialize with these people. All of this meant that she had to play nice with people who were as fake as pleather and twice as slick. She just prayed that this guy wouldn't be one of them. She maneuvered the big truck into the yard and parked it near the warehouse, where she knew most of the supplies would be coming from. She kept her eyes downcast as she swung her feet out of the truck and walked quickly into the store, singing under her breath. Hey, Della, haven't seen you in these parts for a while. Dan Stewart hailed her from behind the counter. Where have you been keeping yourself? Della strolled up to the counter and smiled at Dan. He had always he had always been like an older brother to her, and for some reason her nervousness around guys never extended to him. He definitely fell into the good-looking category, but he wasn't her type. He was too old for one, but he was also way too much of a ladies' man, flirting with anything in heels and a skirt. She wanted a man more discreet than that, someone who was confident enough about himself not to need to make foolish comments that embarrassed everyone. I've been helping Daddy mostly this year, learning the ropes and trying to figure out the books. She strummed her fingers on the counter and nervously as she screwed up the courage to ask for John. He sent me to pick up the supplies today. I guess it's a kind of a test to see how I can handle responsibility of helping him. Dan sprang into action, pulling out an order ticket and cross-referencing it with the one she slid to him. So you hankering to take over the ranch someday? I don't know. It's an option. Brian won't even start high school until the fall, and Stevie's way too young to even think about helping Daddy out beyond basic farm chores. What about Sarah? Couldn't she help with the books? Della scowled at the thought of her older sister. There was only one thing you could rely on Sarah to do: be unreliable. Ever since she had graduated from high school, she had completely done her own thing without a single thought for the rest of the family. Last year, she had decided to elope with a boy who was passing through the area. The family didn't hear about it for 3 months. Then, one day, as if nothing had happened, she walked into the kitchen and sat down for breakfast. She was pregnant, and the boy, who hadn't married her after all, had decided the fun was over. Sadly, she had lost the baby shortly after coming home, and had been pretty much useless ever since. No, Sarah isn't really interested in the ranch. That was all Della would ever say on the subject. As much as she disliked her sister's selfish ways, she would not allow her to look bad in other people's eyes. No one outside the family knew the details of Sarah's return, and that was how it needed to stay. Dan offered conversationally, looking more uncomfortable than she was. She remembered that Dan's sister and Sarah had been good friends, so maybe Dan was just as concerned about Sarah's lack of presence as the rest of the family. Well, let me get this stuff rounded up for you. Okay. As Dan headed back to the back, Della gazed around at the store restlessly, taking stock of her surroundings and singing under her breath. She hated having to stand still. It was against her nature to be quiet and contained without entertainment. People watching People watching was a great pastime, but the store wasn't busy. She could hold it together in a theater as long as the movie was good, but if you put a good book in front of her, she could imitate a statue quite well. But waiting around for other people was a huge trial for her. She glanced at the checklist her dad gave her and remembered that she needed to talk to John. "Oh, Dan?" She gulped down her nerves. "Daddy has some special feed he'd like to try next month." "Oh, sure," Dan yelled from the back corner. "I'll get John for you. Have you met him yet?" No. How long has he worked for you?" Dan looked over his shoulder as he headed toward the door leading to the warehouse. "Just a couple of months. Hired him on site after he bluffed his way through the interview. I figured anyone who could evade questions like that without actually lying was worth something to me." Della knew what he meant. There was a vast difference between lying and playing your cards close to the vest. Everyone should be allowed to have a few secrets in life, so long as those secrets didn't endanger anyone. If Dan felt this man deserved a chance, then that was just what this town needed to give him. Plus, Dan needed someone honest to run his inventory, keep it up to date, and, if possible, keep ahead of the game. "Hey, John, you got a lady here to see ya." The comment shook what remained of Della's composure. Was Dan trying to make things harder for her? She looked determinedly at the counter and felt herself blush crimson, waiting for John to appear. "Oh, really? Should I comb my hair?" The voice carrying from the back simply oozed with confidence. Now Della knew that her face was red. This time, though, she was mad. He had a lot of nerve thinking that just because she was a woman, she was going to fall all over herself to meet him. She saw him before he saw her. Normally, she would be tongue-tied around the man like him. He wasn't overly tall, nor was he built large. His hair was dark brown that lent him a more exotic look than other features called for. In fact, there was nothing about him that stood out as extraordinary, which was exactly what appealed to her. He was handsome in a quiet, understated way that she found more attractive than the showy good looks of movie stars. All of this, however, meant nothing after she heard him speak those words. She had half a mind to come across the counter and give him a tongue lashing he was needing for more than combing his hair. "Just go talk to Dolores," Dan said exasperatedly. If Della had been looking at the counter, as was her tendency, she would have missed the myriad of expressions that crossed John's face in the space of 10 seconds. His head whipped around and his eyes went wide. Then they narrowed in confusion before settling on the sparkle of polite interest. "Well now, how can I be helping you today, sweetie?" Della had her indignant outrage in check long enough to ponder what she had just witnessed. She was almost positive that the look she had first seen in his eyes hadn't been anything short of abject terror. However, now was not the time to deal with his fears, real or imaginary. She would have to file that away for another time. Instead, she fixed John with what she figured was her best gimlet glare and prepared to show him that she wasn't some big city miss that would cow to his every whim simply because he decided to honor her with his presence. "You can start by calling me by my name, which is Della. That is the only name I will answer to coming out of your mouth. I am not your sweetie, and while you're at it, you can cross darlin' and honey off that list as well." Instead of looking abashed, John simply grinned. He flipped up the pass-through and tipped his hat. "Yes, ma'am. Or is that one off limits, too?" Della satisfied herself simply by glaring at him as they made their way to the warehouse. The man was too charming by half. She understood now exactly why Dan hired him. He exuded confidence, but he also had an air about him that could bring anyone under his spell. It was as if you couldn't help but feel comfortable around him. He was going to make Dan rich. So that's Della and John. And the really cool part about Della and John's relationship is that meeting actually happened in real life. That was how my parents met. My dad was assistant manager at a hardware store, and my mom was a new hire. And when he went to meet her for the first time, he literally said, "Should I comb my hair?" right in front of her. So this book is roughly based on my parents' romance. Half of the things that happen in here are just completely made up, but I guarantee you half of the things that were said actually were said by my dad or my mom at some point in their romance, or at least in the telling of it to me and my brother and sister as we were children. They are still one of the biggest romance um, advocates, and they are going on strong, being married for 41 years now, and I love them to death. So, Mom and Dad, thank you for the example that you have set for me, and thank you for giving me the inspiration to write romance. I love you both, and go check out Can't Turn Away. It's on sale right now for 99 cents, which will probably be its permanent price from now on, as an introductory book to the series. It's also available on Kindle Unlimited, as are all of my books. Go ahead and check them out and have a fabulous day.